Morning, everyone. You're listening to Supercar Stories, the fast business podcast. We've got Matt Keegan joining us today, hospitality superstar.
So kind.
And we've got Higgsy and Beckett on the podcast today as well. So do you want to start off, Matt, with like a bit of a background on your story? And the idea of the podcast is we want to get a bit of a long form version of a nice car, what's your story, and how you got in the hot seat. So
How long have you got though?
60 minutes.
Okay, so not quite long form.
60 minutes,
Medium form. Yeah, right. So originally I was a law finance guy, studied law and finance at uni, and I was working down in Sydney at PwC for the better part of my career. Spent a lot of time overseas doing all kinds of different stuff. So that was kind of obviously predating my hospitality thing, and that's always a bit of a surprise to people that how did I end up in this industry, sort of restaurants, bars, clubs, things like that.
Yeah.
But
so what's PwC? Is that
PwC, PricewaterhouseCoopers.
Oh, yeah,
okay.
So
So I worked in kind of a multitude of different roles there.
Yeah,
but,
cool.
Worked in kind of cross-border mergers and acquisitions, corporate, and then eventually was in tech consulting. So I was working with like Google and a whole heap of other tech companies, as well as other kind of consulting companies, whether that be in relation to their tax affairs, their corporate affairs, legal disputes, all kinds of different stuff.
Yeah. So tax evasion.
Yeah, exactly right. Yeah, not evasion, minimisation, Ian. Yeah. So yeah, heaps of cross-border planning and stuff like that. So you see companies on the news talking about how they're not paying enough tax or paying enough tax. So I was one of the guys trying to help them with that. So
Yeah, for sure.
How long were you with them for?
I was with them for about 8 years, so yeah, fairly long time. I was a director at the firm there before I left, which is pretty senior. But it was sort of one of those things where I was working there for a really long time, and it got to a certain point where I was really interested in doing other stuff, notwithstanding the opportunities that I had there, which I valued so highly. The firm was so good to me the whole time I was there in promoting me and allowing me opportunities to do other things. But myself and a couple of other guys actually had a couple of startups when we were down in Sydney, and I think my whole family's always been in business, and so I always had a sort of entrepreneurship passion to do something of my own. And after I had a couple of startups, I sort of didn't know whether I could stop, and so the firm graciously allowed me to have some time off whilst I sorted out whether that's what I wanted to do. And I spent that time on the coast and was involved in a couple of businesses. Hospitality was a side thing, and then lo and behold, it ended up becoming the main thing eventually.
So some of those side hustles, did they take off? Did they not take off?
So one of them...
Everyone likes to hear the people's success stories and what was working, but we all know that there's 10 things that didn't work to start with.
Yeah, 100% right. So, I mean, there's plenty of things that we tried that didn't work. Myself and another director at the firm started a business. We caught a craze that was going on in the US. This was predating like Uber Eats or any of the kind of on-demand delivery businesses. But obviously, if you look overseas, they were prevalent long before we had them here. Even before Uber Eats existed, there was, Postmates and things like that in the US.
Yeah.
And there was actually a viral sensation company that started up in the US called Magic, which was about text messaging. So you could just send a text to a number and basically get anything you wanted delivered to you. And the transaction was kind of frictionless over that text message. So it'd be like, oh, can you, send some flowers to my wife? Or can you grab me some Panadol and Powerade because I'm hungover? Or go to McDonald's and get this meal for me? Or buy my kid a new toy? Whatever it was, that service would just locate it, procure it, purchase it, and deliver it to you. And you just, they would just charge you whatever the fee was. And if you agreed to it,
And
they'd do it.
how was the
And so we did that in Australia.
How did they handle the money?
It was all done through Stripe, so there's a number of payment platforms. So you obviously just had to spin up a landing page, and then people would complete the transaction through that landing page, just like you do anything else. There wasn't kind of an app, though. Eventually, we did develop an app to actually facilitate that, as I guess against going through text messages. And to speak to it, it sounds like something that would be hugely successful. And funnily enough, it was hugely successful when we started it down in Sydney. We had huge amounts of demand, but it was so early in terms of a double-sided marketplace for Australia and of course in the US, minimum wage is basically non-existent. So it's a lot easier to get people constantly working for you for really low fees and kind of, I guess, scale up and down your workforce as you need. In Australia, that was really tough at the time. And so it was horrendously expensive to keep a number of staff, available 24 hours, 7 days a week, and we were burning capital. So we needed to raise money. We were also working full time at the time as well. So we needed to
24 hours a day.
24 hours. We need to. I can say it now because I don't work for the firm, but we definitely spent a lot of firm hours, I think, back then on the business. Myself and my business partner, he's still there, so hopefully they don't see this podcast. Yeah, we spent a lot of time on that business, and we tried to raise capital, and we got a vast lesson in how difficult that was in Australia. As compared to the US. And so ultimately we ended up shuttering it, notwithstanding the fact that it had quite a lot of demand and we got a lot of press and things out of it. But it was a quick lesson in kind of how difficult it is to scale a business, definitely while you're working full time and especially when you don't have infinite capital at your disposal.
Was it a hard decision to shut that down?
Yeah, look, it was. I think the hardest decision about abandoning a business or any decision, business or personal, is when you're so invested in it and you can kind of see that it can work. I think that's the hardest part, is when you've got hope and promise, where the idea is terrible and the market feedback is just, this idea sucks. No one's buying it. I think, it's still a difficult decision, but ultimately it's easier because there's just not any kind of positive feedback coming your way. With this one, there was kind of a lot of press and that was positive. There was a lot of market feedback that you could see that you could make money out of this, and you could see how you could transition the financial model to make money. But the risk was probably too great for us, and that was a risk we weren't willing to take at that time. Leaving kind of two of us were in pretty high paying jobs at reputable firms, and to leave that security at that time just was too big of a decision. And I don't regret that. I think it was the right move, and I think you've got to go through those exercises to learn,
definitely,
how to walk away from businesses and how to make the right decision, even when that decision's super tough.
Sure,
absolutely.
I think that's probably like the key to being an entrepreneur is the risk. Not a lot of people understand the risk that you actually take.
Yeah,
because you're as a director, you're liable for the debt, and everything that you own is at risk. And
yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's something not a lot of people appreciate, I think. And like you say, it's always easy to see the good times. People see the positive stuff. It's a bit like an Instagram story. You're only really ever seeing the curated positive impacts. People aren't out there promoting business failures. Maybe that's a popular idea for a different thing to do. That can be your next podcast, business failures. But yeah, it is tough. But I think it is an important thing for people to know that probably 90% of the times that you're trying stuff, it doesn't work, and you've got to walk away from it, and it sucks. And I guess you've got to be able to keep going forward. That's that whole motivational thing that everyone talks about. It's the 1% of the stuff that does work is what you see and what's the most successful. We are so lazy. And, there was, I think in hindsight, it's almost like we could probably try and have something like that now in terms of a concierge service, now that we've kind of established that market. I think the failing and the kind of error of our ways was trying to jump to that end point when we hadn't really in Australia had the initial stuff first. And it wasn't that the consumer didn't want it. The consumer loved the concept. It was the fact that people that wanted to work didn't want to do that. They didn't want to work in a gig economy. They didn't want to work, on sort of, per transaction basis where they're making clipping the ticket on the transaction. Where you sort of say, hey, I'm going to pay you $20 to do this task. People were like, what? Airtasker was pretty well brand new at the time. So this was, I don't even know what year this was, but it would have been probably 6 or so years ago. And Airtasker was relatively new at the time. We were actually finding we called them helpers, the people that were working for us, our contractors. We found a lot of them on Airtasker, ironically. Really? Yeah. Oh, wow. So we'd put up ads because we're like, well, clearly these people are willing to do, tasks for money.
Yeah. It's like super targeted marketing.
Yeah, super targeted marketing.
Just put an ad on Airtasker. I'll pay $20 for you to have a meeting with me.
We did do stuff like that. It was pretty funny, actually. It was, we were using Airtasker's platform to steal people actively off their platform so we could try and steal their customers.
All right, so we don't pitch Airtasker for sponsorship ever again.
Probably not. It was a super popular platform, but just so difficult in terms of getting, I guess, the worker side of the equation. And had we have stuck with it, we would have needed to pay people basically almost as employees, and that would have meant that we would have had to burn significant amounts of cash, which is not dissimilar to the Uber model when they entered into Australia. They had to actually pay people guaranteed amounts of money so that they could get them to provide availability, to the market, so that the customers could constantly use it. Because ultimately you run into that problem on double-sided marketplaces where if the customers can't use it, the seamless, frictionless experience that they're supposed to be experiencing ends up becoming friction, and then it takes too long. They get frustrated. demands for refunds,
Mm.
you know, and then
and that's what's happening with Uber now.
That's a domino.
Like with the cancellations, man.
Yeah, well, I mean, yeah, they introduced that, obviously. I don't know if you're aware, but they introduced that to try and limit the problems that they were having with drivers. So drivers were complaining about having to take trips that were taking them too far away from their homes, or, you know, they couldn't see where they were going. So they'd be like, oh, I'm only on here for another hour. You know, next thing they've got a 1.5 hour journey, or probably more accurately, they wanted to go home in 10 minutes and they're getting a 30-minute journey. And so Uber introduced it for their premium drivers, which realistically is now almost for everyone. Yeah. And so the problem with that is now you get huge cancellations. And I've actually got a friend who's the head of Uber's customer experience program in the US at the moment, and it's a huge problem that they're trying to deal with. I know that for a fact.
Yeah, it's massive. In all the forums, Uber driver forums, everyone's just complaining about it. Everyone's saying this is such BS.
You can't get any situation where you're in a short trip, you're basically getting cancellations all the time now, which I think it's tough. I mean, Uber's a huge company now, and they've kind of transitioned from being that startup mentality over to what they are. And I think that's part of the tough things as well for a lot of companies at scale. We're actually experiencing that a little bit ourselves at the moment with Artesian, where it's like we're growing quite a lot now. We're a huge company. We're over 400 staff. So it's sort of transitioning from that mentality of being small, you know, business or medium-sized business. And when you become larger and larger, you kind of lose sight of, I guess, what that core identity is to some extent. And I think whilst they were that startup mentality where everyone had that, you know, allure of working for them, and, you know, it was all about the customer and whatever it took, and doesn't matter if we're burning money, you know, that ultimately once you get shareholders and external parties significantly involved, that changes. And the staff lose sight of that kind of, that burning desire to make everyone happy and make the company work. Well, that kind of goes away.
Yeah, and there's no like interpersonal relationships with the management anymore or anything like that. It's
more commercial.
No, I can't imagine that there would be. I mean, arguably, Uber's culture was not very good anyway, if you ever read the book or watched the series. But I think that there was an element of kind of they did whatever it took to make it work. And, you know, that came with consequences that were both negative and positive. And, yeah, I think they're going to find it difficult over the next few years, because a lot of people are to the point where they would literally rather take a taxi again than they would order an Uber. Yeah. And, you know, that's saying a lot, because that was probably one of the most hated industries in the world. You know, so
it was like hugely publicized how Uber just strongholded it, like just took over the entire market.
They did. And, you know, it was theirs for the taking, and it still is to some extent, but you're kind of facing the same situation with companies like Meta, you know, Facebook, you know, Facebook's waning in popularity, has been for a long time. They're burning billions on the metaverse. It's another situation where it's like, you know, they got hugely unpopular employee satisfaction ratings. It's just kind of like you keep seeing this trend time and time again. It's probably a big question. It's like, how do these, you know, unicorn startup companies transition from being so wildly popular, so revered in the industry, such darlings amongst employees, the place to work? How do they transition and keep that kind of going and not get constantly disrupted by new things that come along that the market's so willing to adopt and accept because they're hungrier, doing it slightly better? Employees want to go work for them because it's the new cool thing to do. And I don't think, you know, these days people aren't taking careers as seriously.
Yeah.
It's a tough question.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, big time.
Scaling any business is difficult at whatever level, you know, whether it's small or large. It's like you say, trying to get that same feel throughout the whole company. Yeah. No matter how bigger it gets, you know, it's super difficult. There's not a lot of successful companies that have done that.
I think it's hard. I think it's because ultimately a lot of the companies start and they kind of hero a lot of the founder. And then so once that founder is either, you know, pushed aside by venture capital or, you know, PE or shareholders or whatever the situation is, or whether they just become too busy to be able to be involved at that level that they used to be, where they're going to these meetings all the time, they're doing town halls, they're doing all this stuff, they're getting all the employees excited. At a certain point, the reality just becomes you can't do that. Like, you just don't have enough hours in the day. And I think that's the tough thing. You've got to find people that you can get that are kind of almost built in your image, which I think is what a lot of the startups do at the beginning. But then eventually they just get forced to corporatize, and you just can't have that anymore. You can't. It's just like they want diversity, and they want, you know, they want everything to slow down and move at a really smooth, even pace, and just safety becomes the name of the game. It's about protecting. It's not about growing or being innovative or being, you know, that's the difficulty. And it's an interesting question, I think, for all companies at the moment, because I think that's the historic way to do things, because things did grow slowly, and being prudent and smart and slow, and that worked really well. But I think that the pace at which things move now and the rate at which everything's so digitalized, people just don't frankly give a shit anymore. They don't care that, you know, that company's so good and so trustworthy and all that kind of stuff. They just don't give a shit. Like, I mean, TikTok's like a Chinese owned business, which, you know, not to say anything against China, but like there's very good chance that that's a state owned entity, you know, and people don't give a shit. No one cares about the fact that they're basically giving their data to China. No one cares about the fact that that app has been like outed as effectively trying to educate China whilst make other countries arguably dumber by promoting content that is frivolous and stupid.
Trivial.
Trivial.
Did you see on the Joe Rogan podcast where he read the terms, the TikTok terms and conditions out loud?
Yeah.
It was like astonishing.
It's like a troll.
They're like, they can use TikTok to log into your laptop and troll data off your laptop.
Yeah, I mean, they're literally telling everyone in plain sight, which is kind of hilarious because typically they would just hack your computer and not tell you. But now they're literally telling you that's what we're going to do. And obviously no one reads T's and C's, so they know that. And so, you know, in some ways it's now legal. So, I mean, but that just proves how much the new generation of people, they don't care. They're not looking into it. They're not reading, you know, the packet. They're not thinking about the product. They're not going, who sold this to me? Where's it come from? They don't care anymore. All they care about is this cooler? Is this better? Is this cheaper? Is this faster? That's what they care about. And that's...
It comes down to the speed too. It's instant gratification.
Yeah.
Everybody wants everything now.
100%.
So
that's literally been the way of society for the past 5, 6, 7 years since, I guess, the like appification of everything, and now it's just everything's about that now. Everything.
Yeah. And it's semi-unconscious too. Like, I know that I'm like that. If I order an Uber and it's not there in like 4 minutes, I'm like, what the hell, man? Like, this is bullshit. 4 minutes, literally 4 minutes. I've waited for someone to drive in a car and pick me up.
Yeah.
I'm like frustrated about it. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Well, we talk about, it's like, you know, you get 3 cancellations and it delays your trip by 5 or 6 minutes, and you're just like, this is totally unacceptable. Someone needs to disrupt this industry.
I'm sending an email.
Something needs to happen. Someone needs to create a better version of this instantly.
They won't create a better version. They'll go back to taxis.
Yeah. Well, look, I think they're picking their game up too, to be honest, the taxi game.
Yeah,
like I got in one not long ago because same thing. I got cancelled 3 times and I saw a taxi sitting there. I'm just like, you know what? I'm just going to deal with it.
Jump in that.
And it was all right. Like, and it wasn't overly expensive. Like, we used to get in, it cost you $20 to put your bum on the seat.
Exactly.
Yeah. And they've dropped that back. I think they're really starting to work on that and probably moving towards an app like Uber.
I think that, I mean, they've already got an app. I think it's called like iHail or something like that. But I think that the problem is just the stigma that's still attached to them that they're still trying to wash off. But I think what's interesting is that in Australia, none of the others have really picked up, like Lyft and DD and that. They're here, but they're not really that big. And, you know, the irony of the fact that Lyft was actually the first ride-sharing company and yet got absolutely trolled, you know, effectively by Uber. Yeah, it was down to marketing and I guess who was willing to conduct more subterfuge, which was clearly Uber. But yeah, but again, that just shows what it takes, and no one cares. Frankly, we iconicized what Uber did, and you know, in many ways it was illegal. It was illegal, and in many ways, like, it was terrible or stuff they did. But frankly, again, no one gives a shit. Everyone goes, it was great. I got my Uber Eats. I got Uber out of it. And my rides were cheap. And the fact that they were like actively destroying other people's businesses through like completely illegal anti-competitive means, no one cares about that. And I think that's going to continue, and it's going to get more and more. And, you know, politically, as we get more, I guess, left and right and, you know, I guess radicalized in terms of people's views, I think that'll just keep happening to businesses. People will just exploit that. And I don't know, is it a bad thing? I guess time will tell.
Yeah, I think it keeps the market competitive.
It definitely keeps the market competitive, and I guess it just brings about the question of like, how far is too far? You know, when Uber's actively creating, you know, I guess apps to fuck with other competitors' apps, is that okay? You know, is that competitive behavior? And it's like, that's all good. When
is it fair market?
Actively, you know, basically blackballing regulators by, you know, creating zones where they can't see what's going on, where they're lying to people like Apple in the App Store so that they can breach their terms and conditions and lie to their customers. How far is too far? Yep. When's it okay? When's it just competitive behavior? And I'm pretty free enterprise, so I'm kind of like, you know what, you know, I guess go for it. But at the same time, there's got to be some kind of limits to what we'll allow. And I think the public needs to probably at some point start making some of these companies accountable. We talk about TikTok terms and conditions. They basically said, we're going to hack your computer. We're going to use all your personal data against you. And then the worst part is they're then actively pretty much saying we're going to use it to influence outcomes politically. Like, when's that not okay? You know?
Yeah. Such a new age problem too. Like that amount of power to be held in one company's hands through the use of data.
Yeah.
Like, it's such a new age problem that no one's come
across.
Like, it's only in the last decade really where big data has become available to companies at scale, like within 12 months. Like, these companies can have like insane amounts of data within 12 months of launch.
Yeah. I mean, they have enough information on pretty much, almost anyone on the planet right now to be able to, they know exactly who you are. They know how to influence you. They know everything. That's the thing. They know how to influence outcomes. And I mean, I don't know, like that, the whole Cambridge Analytica thing, I don't know whether you guys are aware of that, but like that was a huge scandal, you know, for the people who weren't aware of it. Basically, Cambridge Analytica was a firm that consumed data from people like Facebook or Meta, and then they used it to influence all kinds of things, but most notably they used it to influence political outcomes. So they were hired by Russia to try and influence the US election. They were hired to, you know, it was like Uruguay, Zimbabwe. They basically controlled those elections. And it's like verified facts, like what they actually did. And I mean, they're defunct now, but it was crazy the stuff they were doing, you know, and it was because they had so much data, they could literally put an ad out exactly to every single person that would resonate with you and just move your idea slightly, which is scary because I think a lot of people like to think, oh, you know, no, I'm not, you know,
I'm a free thinker.
I'm a free thinker, you know, I like to think I wouldn't be influenced, but I mean, I think you can be pretty easily because if they're telling you stuff, you can start to move your opinion, you know, and it doesn't take too long until you're probably thinking something that you think is your own idea. It's a bit like Inception.
Yeah, 100%. All of a sudden you're there like, Trump, go Trump.
Yeah, I don't want to say Trump or anyone else because I know that's a hot topic, but like it is one of those things where I think people were influenced to think things in a lot on both the left and the right that aren't necessarily true. I think both sides to some extent are now playing that game where it's like, it's the end of the world, you know, if either one of these two people are involved, when the reality is it's probably not the end of the world either way. Yeah. It's just that we're being made to think that because it's like, that's the popular narrative now. It's like, go the extreme view.
It's like Black Mirror shit, eh? Like, have you seen that Netflix? That Netflix series? That's some of the stuff in that show is like literally unfolding before our eyes coming true.
It is.
Crazy. Getting deep. So Artesian, how did that come about? So you're doing some startups, you're working in the finance sector with a firm, and then...
Yeah, so I had an opportunity to, I guess, get involved in a number of different businesses up here. And so I was originally involved in oil and gas stuff over in the States and was doing that. And hospitality was kind of like a side thing. So I'd always been interested in it. I'm a pretty social guy. I enjoy, you know, going out for dinners and doing stuff like that. I did it a lot when I was at work. Well, I still work, but when I was working for PwC. And so that was something that was sort of a side thing. So we had White Rhino, which was a restaurant and bar that we built out on the coast. And it was sort of not really a priority. It was more just a fun thing. And then eventually what happened was just before pre-COVID, you know, things were oil prices were really low. The market was sort of flooded. And then, so we had issues with that business. And so I got more time to start thinking about other things that we could do. And at the time, the hospitality business was an area that I was starting to look into more seriously based on stuff that I was seeing in the US because I was spending a lot of time over there. And I started to realize how not easy, but how, I guess, underserviced and underfocused the hospitality industry really is with people that kind of approach it from a different perspective. And that is, you know, a lot of the time it's filled with people that have transitioned from being, you know, a manager or a chef or something like that into owning their own business. And then they go on, you know, then they kind of expand from there, which is not to say that they don't think about it from, you know, a financial standpoint. Many of them do, but I think a lot of people aren't really thinking about it from like a marketing and financial standpoint where they sit there and they go, what is the margin on this stuff? How do I actually, you know, grow this? How do I, you know, increase or reduce customer acquisition costs through digital channels and increase the value of that customer once they get into my business? A lot of them are thinking a bit more subjectively, I think, because they've got that emotional attachment to their history of having worked in the industry, that they're like, I know what works, or I know what sort of food people want. Whereas I look at it and go, my sales report will tell me the answer to those questions. People that I talk to in industry and stuff like that where a lot of the time I'm like, oh, that's interesting, you know, what's the numbers on that or something? And a lot of the time the answer is, oh, I don't know the numbers, but like, I just, you know, that's what I've been seeing a lot. I'm kind of like, right. And a lot of our managers and people within our business will think that way as well, because I think intuitively they just think that's the answer. And to be honest, a lot of the time it's not. When you sit down, you bring the data up on the screen, they're almost shocked when I sort of say to someone, what do you think our top 5, you know, alcoholic beverages are? Or what do you think our top 5 meals are? A lot of the time their answers are wrong.
Yeah, because in the window that they're at work, they might see a lot of beer going out, but it's like that's lunchtime or whatever, you know. And then the top seller at night might be vodka Red Bull or whatever.
And I think there's a lot of confirmation bias, you know, where, you know, people are trying to lean towards what they like the most as well. And so, you know, that's the whole thing where it's like people are always wanting to do what they want to do. Whereas I look at the hospitality side of things and, you know, I definitely enjoy my businesses now. I get to have a lot of fun in them. But at the end of the day, it's still a business and it's there to make money. And that's how I approach it. And so there's plenty of things that I would do differently in my businesses. If it was for me personally to make me personally happy, you know, I would probably change the menus at some of the places and have what I want to eat there all the time. I'd probably change, you know, the entertainment at some of the places and have what I want to listen to all the time. But that's not the best way to run a business. You don't run a business for yourself unless that's your goal, I guess.
Yeah, exactly.
If your goal is just to make yourself happy, if it's not about making money, then by all means run that business. But you know, I think there, and it probably plays on like some of those things that you see on Instagram all the time, where it's like, you know, find something that you're passionate about and makes you happy, and you know, do that as a business. Yeah, true. You do want to be passionate. You do want to be happy about what you're doing, but don't be misguided into believing that that's necessarily that what you want is what your customer wants, because a lot of the time it just isn't what they want. Yeah. And so, but yeah,
you got to have passion for the operation of the business, but you also got to have passion for the analysis of the P&L.
Yeah, I mean, I think
the accounting. Like
for me, I'm passionate about, frankly, you know, making money. So
yeah, exactly.
That means that whatever the business is, I can be passionate about it as long as I can see that we're going to make money out of it. And hospitality is kind of a double win, because I'm also passionate about, you know, going out for dinner and having a few drinks. So it works well on both sides. But so yeah, I guess back to the original question, how did it get to this? Well, when COVID sort of set in, we started to have a lot more free time on our hands. All of us, I think, probably did. And so I started really thinking about it and thinking, hey, what could we do to sort of grow? And it probably sounds counterintuitive to most people to think, hey, the right time to go and start, you know, getting into hospitality really seriously, like doubling down on it. COVID's the time. A lot of people sort of said, what in the actual F are you thinking, you know, going and doing this stuff? But it was actually the best time, because at the beginning of COVID, before the market took off, landlords and everyone were scared. They were concerned. Yeah. And people, you know, sadly were going broke. So vacancy was on the increase. Landlords were willing to cut deals. And, you know, one of the best things I think in businesses, in business in general, is like when you invest, Warren Buffett classically says, you invest when others are fearful, and, you know, you take profits off the table when other people are happy, because that's the truth. When business is booming, you're going to be paying sky high rents. COVID was the time when rents were at all-time lows. You could get into a lease and you could sign it long-term on terms that otherwise were just non-existent pre-COVID. And so that's what we did. We went and signed leases on a number of different properties where, frankly, we were paying rates that were, and I mean, this is public knowledge if anyone cares to look it up, but like, we're not even paying the outgoings on some of these buildings. So, and we're locked in, we got 20+ year leases.
Wow.
And I've got no market rent reviews. I've got no fixed increases. I've got lower of CPI and 3% terms. So it's like the actual cost of acquiring, you know, leases was so low, so astronomically low, that it's literally cheaper for me to lease the building than even if I owned it. And even if I owned it cash outright. So we went and signed a few different properties up, and we thought, well, you know, how long is this going to last for? Realistically, at the time, we probably thought maybe 6 to 12 months. We turned out to be wrong, but we sort of started the construction process. We acquired a couple of different other properties. We renovated some of our nightclubs. We acquired other leases and started construction on places like Cali, which was a huge undertaking. And yeah, I guess it turned out that it was longer than 6 to 12 months for COVID. But in all truthfulness, the impacts of COVID, because we were lucky enough to be in Queensland, were not as catastrophic as what they were in places like Sydney and Melbourne. And so we actually started to see that, you know, businesses were doing quite well, and arguably in some instances even better than pre-COVID, even during the COVID period. If you were smart, because there was opportunities there to pivot your business. And I think that was, again, something that I was used to, having to try and pivot and do different things. So we started, delivering to people's houses. We were creating different experiences. We transitioned our nightclubs into table service bookings, and people were so keen to get out of the house that, frankly,
they wanted
it. It was like, oh, it's $100 minimum spend to come to this place. No worries, I'll pay it because I just want to get out of the house, and this is the only place that's open, so I'm going. And the government was quite generous, if we're realistic about things like JobKeeper and stuff like that, which reduced the cost of business. You could open, and a quarter to half of your staff cost was paid for you, and there were other concessions constantly coming in through business grants and things, which if you're on the pulse, you could get those grants, which just further increased the profitability during that period. So I think, we were fortunate in that we were in a financial position to be able to expand. A lot of people weren't. But I think, again, that's just prudence. You shouldn't be running a business where you've got 1 week's worth of money left in your bank account. Yeah. That's not a business, really. Exactly. Again, that's back to the original point. A lot of people that ran their business, where it's sort of like they got their one place. It's sort of their job, where they're kind of paying themselves, and there's no dishonor in that. But I think it's also looking at it and going, does this really make sense? Do I need to look at what I'm doing here and either try and improve my product offering, or if you're only making enough money where you're literally just getting by week to week, that's a tough way to run a business. And I think that's definitely what happens at the beginning. But if you're kind of doing that 4 or 5 years, then you need to really take a hard look at that business and go, does this make sense?
Yeah, exactly. So that's courage, though, man. Like, courage to go all in and just be like, chips in. We're just signing leases like wildfire during COVID.
Yeah, I mean, it definitely was bold of us to do it, being truthful and honest and transparent. Also, the risk isn't huge, and I think that's the reality of it is when I don't have a single personal guarantee, we'll never give a landlord one. And so the risk is for that company alone, We don't sign leases in a head company. And again, this is my law and finance background, so I know this, but you sign leases in individual entities. So if that business doesn't work, if we opened up a business and it didn't succeed, or if it got to the point where we said, hey, look, this just isn't feasible to even start building this business, then you have the ability to walk away from that entity, and you can close that entity down, and it'd be a massive hit to the ego, and you'd be upset. And thankfully, I've never really had to do it. But if you're smart about the way you expand, you can also protect your downside risk, which I think is important, because a lot of people fear that it's too risky. I don't want to expand. I don't want to risk everything I've got. You don't have to. You can be smart about the way you expand.
Yeah, the structure is super important, the way you structure a business too.
Yeah, it's hugely important. And if you don't have that, like, I'm lucky I've got that experience, but if you don't have it, you should get proper advice. Absolutely. And I think a lot of people take too long to get that advice and put themselves in situations that they don't want to be in or they shouldn't be in. And I've seen plenty of businesses over the years, even massive ones, go down just because of bad advice or bad structuring or whatever it is. They're hugely profitable, but they've got this one area that isn't, and they can't get away from this one, and then the whole thing goes down because it's either improperly structured or they make a bad decision that they can't let the dying business go.
Yeah, sometimes you got to cut your losses, eh?
Yeah, you've got to. But and we actually did have a situation throughout COVID where one of our landlords didn't want to play ball with us, and they were just absolutely horrendous, and we had to make the decision in the end. We actually walked away from that property, and it ended up in a litigation dispute. But for us, there was no huge downside risk because he has our bond, and that's it. As long as you've got that negotiating power, then you're in you come from a position of strength to try and negotiate. But sometimes people aren't practical. Sometimes people aren't pragmatic, and so you've got to make the decision for them.
Yeah, when the egos get involved.
Yeah, that's right. So before White Rhino, we had that bedroom in Sin City, and then since then we've opened up Havana and Cali, and then Surface Pavilion, and then now we've got a number of new businesses. Over the next 18 months, we're actually under construction on 6 new venues. So
I saw the GPO in the news.
Yeah.
That's the Brizzy one, yeah.
So there's going to be multiple venues in that one, which is going to be really cool. It's sort of it's a different sort of precinct, obviously, to what we've got on the Gold Coast. So we're going to it's a lot higher end, kind of more like the James Street offerings up there that are up in Fortitude Valley. So that'll be exciting. It's a new type of business. But yeah, so the Brisbane, it's exciting. It's a beautiful building, heritage listed building. And so we're starting construction, or already started construction on that, hoping that it'll be done by the end of the year. But I'm looking forward to that one. It's probably going to be one of the most exciting openings, I think, outside of Cali, will be the Brisbane project. Yeah. Just because it's the first one, obviously, in a new city, and represents a massive investment as well from what we're doing up there. Yeah, that's probably the this is the scaling part of the business that's so tough. It's like keeping everything moving on the normal side, but you're spending so much time on new projects that you become so tired with what you're supposed to be spending your time on. And, you know, you see stuff happening in your existing businesses, and inevitably with scale it gets to that point where you've got to start to let go of things that frustrate you normally. So it's like if you've got one business and it's yours, easy, right? You're just focused on that. You're focused on that one area, and it's simple. But when you've got so many, like I said, you know, we're kind of going to be at about 12 venues in the next 12 months, and there'll be probably about 600 to 700 staff total. There'll be about 45 people just in our corporate office. And then you've got more projects on the go. It's so difficult to work out where to spend your time. And I think the hardest part for any entrepreneur is letting things that you see that you don't like or you're not happy about or aren't kind of like up to the standard that you want, being able to just sleep at night and let that stuff go, because you can't control everything. And the people that work for you, as great as they are, and I've got some fantastic people, it isn't their business. And, you know, at the end of the day, they're getting paid, you know, in a lot of instances very well, but it's never going to be the same passion as what you have for your business. And I think sometimes, I've seen this happen with other people. Some people strangle their business or strangle their staff because they can't accept the imperfection. And unfortunately, the reality is if you want to scale a business, you're going to have to.
Yeah, exactly.
So coming to terms with that's been something that's been interesting over the past 12 months for me, as I try and accept the reality of what things are and watch as sort of things are like, oh God, I don't like that. Or
yeah, but as long as it doesn't ruin the brand, then it's fine.
Yeah, and I think that's you've got to approach it from that perspective. Yeah. You can't sweat the small stuff. You really can't. And yeah, it's just one of those things. So I like things to be.
It's counterproductive too, like, because, you know, you ruin the employee experience then, and then everyone's dissatisfied. They're like, this guy's micromanaging me.
Yeah.
Blah, blah, blah. And then it gets worse and worse and worse, you know?
Yeah, 100%.
So do you want 80% or do you want 0?
That's correct. And that's exactly what you've got to accept. And I think it's for your own sanity as much as it is for your employees as well. Otherwise you can't deal with it. So now I try and whenever I go into venue or whatever, I just kind of try and let them just do their thing. I will never really speak to them on shift or anything like that. Let them run the business how they need to run it, and then we deal with that and kind of wash up management meetings and stuff if there's things that are worthy of discussion. So it's pretty corporatized structure these days. We've got in-house legal and HR and all kinds of things, which is it's kind of weird because when I talk to people, even people that I used to work with, they're like, wow, it's a really serious business. And, you know, they see stuff in the press and like, wow, you guys are doing like over 50 mil a year. That's pretty intense. I'm like, yeah. And it's sort of to think back sort of even 3 or 4 years ago when it was nothing like that. It's weird because when you're in the situation, it's like when you're watching like a kid grow up or something like that. I don't think, not that I know, but you don't notice it day to day, what's actually happening. Yeah. It's the same as your own aging, I think. Like I don't feel like I'm getting older, but I am. And it's the same with the business. It's growing, it's getting bigger, but you just don't notice it. And then it takes really looking back at it and people telling you what's happening and you're like, oh wow, we actually have achieved a lot.
Yeah. So you've sort of had parabolic curve like in the last 3 or 4 years.
Oh yeah, it's been hockey stick growth for us, which I think for me is kind of the only way I really operate. So it was like that when I was in my career. I accelerated. I was pretty young as a director there in my, you know, mid 20s. Well, I think it was like 26, 27 when I got director, which is typically something people get in their 30s. I've always been like, nope, I want it now. Let's go. Let's make this happen.
Is that just your personality?
Yeah, it is my personality. Yep. I'm pretty like, yep, I want this. I want to make it happen. When I want something, I want it now.
Yep.
And
would have felt you would have felt restless on the McLaren wait list.
I'm not a good waiter. In fact, one of my business partners said you should just go and put deposits down at like Ferrari and like everywhere. Just go put deposits down. At least then you're in the queue. Because then, like, you know, you got to start. At least then you're in the queue for cars. So that then in 2 years' time, you can work out whether you want it or not. And I'm like, that just seems fucking stupid. I'm like, I don't want a car in 2 years. And then anyway, he's like, let's just do it because he was getting an Aston at the time. And so we drove around to the dealerships and we had a horrendous experience. But we went to all these dealerships and Ferrari's like, no, you can't get on a wait list. There's nothing available. You have to wait for another spot. You can put your name down on a spot. I'm like, what the hell's going on here? I'm not putting my name down to get onto the wait list.
Yeah, wait list.
Like, I'm not going to be on the wait list for the wait list. So I was like, there's got to be a better way. I'm not going to accept this.
Yeah.
So yeah.
What, and the showroom's just empty. They've got posters up of the cars.
I mean, they may as well because they're not selling anything. So, I mean, I don't know what the salespeople are actually doing all day. I mean, half the time you go in there and they barely talk to you anyway, but they literally probably don't even need to show up to work at the moment because I think that, and you know better than me, but I think the entire production run for almost every Ferrari except is like 2 years out. And isn't the allocation completely full for most of the cars? So it's like the manufacturing line's done. Like you can't even get one. Unless you buy someone else's that's hectic, coming, that's on the list. So,
like I know Mercedes have just shifted their buying model. So Mercedes Australia own all the vehicles in Australia.
Yeah.
And I think they're moving towards buying cars online. Like you pick what color you want, you pick your spec, and send it like you send an Uber Eats order.
That's it.
Yeah,
I think that's
negotiating.
I think that is. Yeah, well, they moved to a flat pricing model. Like years ago, didn't they? But okay, yeah. Well, I mean, I think that's what they will do though. And it makes the most sense. It's actually kind of surprising to me more people haven't done that through COVID and taking advantage of this current supply constraint because that's the best time. We actually did that. Don't want to give it away to our customers, but we did that. We used it as an opportunity when there was kind of constrained supply to reset pricing expectations, which was historically something that was really difficult to do. People were so locked into being like, no, this is the price of a drink. And no matter the fact that CPI is going up, costs are going up, people get so psychologically tied down to price points. And I think for cars, there was a psychology of like, I can negotiate and I can do this and I can try and get options for free and I can, you know, and it's what starts out as like, I guess, normal customer behavior or normal competitive behavior becomes the norm. And then it's like, it keeps going further and further. Whereas this is the perfect opportunity now because no one's trying to negotiate on a new car. I think for obviously if we're talking exotics and supercars, then yeah, they are because they can't get them. Obviously, when you move down the scale, I think into normal production cars, clearly people are still going to try and negotiate because they're used to that. But if I was a manufacturer, I'd be thinking, okay, let's do what Mercedes has done. Let's just make the price, and that's it. If you want to buy this car, that's the price. And if everyone else followed that in lockstep, that's it. Negotiations over for cars.
Yeah, similar to Apple. You can't get a discount on Apple anywhere.
And that's a good model because no one even thinks about it anymore. No one thinks, this is bullshit. You know,
and it holds value in the brand too.
It does.
It makes it something that like it's the perception of the brand is just way higher when the price is the price.
Yeah, I mean, as long as your product can back it up, then I think there's no issue with doing that, right? It kind of sends a signal, which is we're not gonna, I guess, undervalue our products. We don't need to discount. And that kind of applies to a lot of businesses, I think. I think a lot of people are quick to discount and try and, win business that way. But I think there's always the inverse of looking at that and saying, well, how can I make my business better that people just want to come here? And we literally did do that with our businesses. In the nightclub model, a lot of people used to try and do stuff where it'd be like discounted entry and, free drink on arrival or all kinds of stuff like that. And that still happens. People have even started going back to that already post-COVID, but we took the view and we still have it where it's just like, we're never going to do that again. We're not going down that pathway. We're going to be, this is what it is. And the product stands by itself. It's the busiest place. It's got the best offering. If you want to come here, then yes, you have to pay. And if you want to go across the road where it's not as good, then yeah, you can not pay. And that marketing message has resonated with customers. And it's to the point where we're the only ones that trade, within that precinct 7 days a week. No one else does, which is kind of odd because you think, if another place opens up and it's all free, clearly people will go there. They won't. Just like people don't stop buying Apple because they can't get a discount.
Yeah, or
the
they
product's
can get
good enough, they'll pay
cheaper or whatever. People just buy Apple.
Well, it puts it in a premium marketplace straight away. If it's not discounted, not cheap, people see it as it's the pinnacle.
It's a psychologically good thing from a marketing perspective, that's for sure. I mean, people like things that are expensive, and if they have some kind of inherent value in them, then it's perceived to be even better because you're paying more money. I mean, I think that there's probably not necessarily in many cases, even with our cars, a multi-$100,000 difference between that car and, another car. Speed, you can get that in a Tesla.
Yeah.
But, like if you're paying upwards of $500,000 for a car, that's a bit of a statement.
Yeah, exactly.
And people, that's not lost on people. And the fact that now we're paying, in many cases, $1 million for a car, it's pretty crazy when you think about it. The average home price, whilst it's gone up a lot, probably hasn't gone to the point that now a supercar, a lot of them are. A lot of them are $1 million. It was only a few years ago where that was crazy. Now it's like A lot of them are $1 million.
Like,
many
GT3
are more than
is like
millions of dollars.
$850 or something now. Like 2021 GT3 used with 2,000 Ks on it, you're probably paying $800,000 or something.
Yeah.
Like that's
and they're bringing out more and more cars like that. Like, I mean, I know I was talking to the guys at Aston when they brought the Valkyrie and the Valhalla, and there was an opportunity to buy a Valhalla at one point, and I was contemplating it. It would have been a stupid decision, but I really wanted one for a brief moment in time. And funnily enough, I was actually going to just put a deposit down on it, and it's not one of the normal $10,000 deposits. Like I think it was like $350 or something they wanted, then they wanted another $350 6 months later. So you're like you were like going to be like $1 million into the car within a couple of years. And I was kind of thinking, it'll be okay. Like we're going to be making lots of money. I'll go down that path. It'll probably be a good investment. I'd almost rationalize that it would make some kind of sense to make this purchasing decision. And I was supposed to go, it's a funny story. So
that was the ads, man.
I was supposed to go to look at the car in Melbourne because I was there for F1, and they had a private viewing at one of these places in the city. Only for people who were on the list or something, I think. I don't know. Well, that's what they say to try and make you feel special. And so I told the buyer's rep, I said, look, don't make this appointment for the morning because there's every chance I'm going to be like hungover and sleep in and miss it. I'm going to be out every night. I'm doing all kinds of stuff while I'm there. Anyway, so he's like, you can have 2 slots. One of them was like 9 o'clock in the morning or 10 o'clock in the morning. I think the day after I was flying in. The next slot was, I don't know, it was like 6 p.m. or something. I was like, that's no good. I'm going to be already out drinking at that time. So I took the 10 o'clock slot and I said, I'll make it work. Yeah, I didn't make it work. I missed the slot. I missed it. And so I was like, afterwards, I was actually, funny story. I think I was actually in a mate's pool. We were like, it was like 4 a.m. And I was like, shit, I'm supposed to be going to look at this car in like 6 hours. And I told them all about it. And they're like, there's no way you're going. I was like, I reckon I might. I really want to see the car. And yeah, I got home and I missed it. And so then I was like, I felt bad about missing the appointment. So I just didn't reply to them after that.
Have you always been into cars?
Yeah, I have. I've always been massively into cars. I was a JDM guy from way back. So my first ever car was a 32 GDST. Nice. And so I was obsessed ever from then. I had multiple GDRs. I've still got a 32 GDR track car now. And yeah, every single car I've ever owned was always a manual. The McLaren's the first one that's not, I guess, like a proper manual. And so, I was always one of those kids who was like, oh my God, you never own an automatic, like everyone I think is like that when they first get into cars. And so, yeah, I was always into them. I went to, out to Willowbank when I was younger all the time and go out there for test and tune drag nights and go out for track days. And yeah, I was mad car fanatic. And even when I was at university, I was really, really into it. I would have loved to have, raced cars, I think, when I was younger, but it was just one of those things where it's a pretty expensive sport to be into. And whilst I spent probably way too much of my parents' money on cars as it was, I never went down that pathway. Did a bit of karting, but never anything too serious. Yep. Yeah, I've always loved them, always modifying them. I was never down that kind of pathway of the auto salon rice style. I was always more like, this car doesn't punch out some numbers on the dyno. I have zero respect for it.
God, those were the days, auto salon.
Oh, mate, auto salon. God, it was good. Most of the people watching this podcast won't even know what that was.
No, they're actually bringing it back, believe it or not.
Are they really?
Yeah, so a mate of mine, Andrew Hawkins, and
I know.
Yeah, he's involved in it, so maybe next year we'll see auto salon on Gold Coast and Sydney again.
God, that would be so amazing. That was such a good thing. Yeah. The days of auto salon, and like anyone who's from back in those days remembers, I think, like auto salon, the Broadwater car park, and then Springwood Macca's, which culminated in other certain activities out on the highway, which
we can't talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely never part of, right? But
do you remember the boom gate at the toll?
Oh yeah, the drag strip start line.
You're talking about the unofficial drag strip.
The Gold Coast dragway.
Chuck the coin into the little slot and it opened up.
8 into 1, 8 into 2.
It had like a funnel on there. You just throw a coin.
It is hard to believe like how anyone ever got sitting here today. It's like, how did we ever get away with that? Like, how were you able to just run straight up drag racing sessions out on the M1, constant roll racing, like? And it was every week.
Every week.
I don't understand how it
3 nights a week.
How did people what was going on? Where were the police? I mean, they very rarely ever showed up.
I think we were probably a bit smarter than them, to be honest.
Yeah.
At the
Do
time.
you think? I don't know, man. We went from the Broadwater car park straight out to like whatever it was, like the BP out at what was
not Coomera BP.
No, not Coomera, but yeah, whatever that one was, where you drove straight to the highway, and then it was like it was just straight away on. Like, I mean, anyone who had a car knew that's what was going on every week. So I don't know how they know, but they seem to know straight away anytime anyone's out there these days. And
the traffic cameras.
Once they got Pole Air,
cameras in the chopper,
the chopper was the end of that
100%.
because it was like, I guess back then you could probably pretty easily outrun.
Easy.
Well, you definitely could have outrun the cops. So, but yeah, now with Pole Air, and all the cameras and
different story.
And it's all social media, I guess, as well too.
And dash cams.
Dash cams.
How long have you had the McLaren for?
Pretty new, so I've only had it for I think it's like 4 months now. So yeah, it's still
got some fruit on it already.
Yeah, it does. Yeah, so it's got the new exhaust. It's actually got rift carbon side skirt extensions on as well. You can't really notice because they're pretty much just the same as the 765 side skirts. And I've actually got fenders for it as well, but the paint shop's waiting on the paint because this is like obviously a special one that you have to get from McLaren. So they're waiting on that.
20 grand a tin of paint.
I'm sure it is.
We'll
prime it properly though.
Then make sure it's high gloss. Make sure it's the high gloss can.
Start off the edge and just
feather at the end.
Yeah.
You sound like you've done this before.
Well, yeah, I mean, I'm a car guy and we used to go out to the track. So back in the day, it wasn't quite the same financial position. So I had to, everything was fiberglass back then most of the time as well with your body kits. So I got a little too familiar with the fiberglass resin and the sheets and then trying to paint match with putty it up. And back you putty it up and then of course it would flex and then it would just come back out and crack. God, that happened way too many times.
Yeah. Can you tell us a bit about your 32?
Yeah.
I know you told me briefly.
So I got a pretty serious 32. It's got two different engines. So it's got a billet engine for when it's doing serious track work. They're both the exact same spec, so they're stroked out RB26 blocks to 2.9, and then they've got custom pistons, custom rods. The whole engine's pretty insane. It's a really, really serious piece of kit, that thing. Revs out to 10K.
That sounds mental.
It sounds insane. And so we've got multiple different turbos depending on the track setup and what we're trying to get out of the car, but can range anywhere from sort of 800 horsepower up to about 1500 horsepower. We could push it further, but I mainly do circuit work, so there's never any need, frankly, for it ever to be even close to that. And the only reason we push that power is because we've got such a high rev range, so we can afford to be going from 7 to 10.
Yep.
But yes, runs an Albin sequential box, paddle shift. It's got air jacks, Lexan glass. It's a proper race car. It's full on, got cool suit in it. And I don't know how to describe how far it is. But I guess like air jacks. Once you're at air jacks and Lexan glass, then you kind of realize how serious a race car it is.
That's not through the Macca's drive-through anymore.
I did take it on a mountain run once before all the modifications, so it was still road legal then. But
obviously,
okay.
But yeah, that was actually in its earlier trim, so it was a little less aggressive. Now it's really aggressive in terms of how it looks, but it's still super clean. And so yeah, it's about to finish its latest sets of stuff that's been getting done to it because we just moved it to being paddle shift and stuff like that in advance of World Time Attack, which won't be next year, but the year after due to the aero stuff that takes like over a year to get developed through all the modeling and stuff like that. But it'll spend a bit of time. I'll probably do Noosa Hill Climb and a few other events in it over the next 12 months. Probably, I might do like street series, but yeah, we'll see because it can get into that in the open class the way it currently is. But yeah, it's a lot of fun, that car. It's a completely different experience driving one of those things than it is driving something like this. Like that's got 1,000 horsepower or just under now with the flash tune and everything. But it's completely different driving a 32 GDR with 1,000 horsepower.
It's super raw. Hey,
it's very raw. Even with all the electronics and stuff in it now, it's still super visceral raw experience where it's just shaking through the cabin that
it'd
screaming
RV too,
it's fully stripped fully stripped. There's nothing in it, and
you'd hear everything in that thing.
You hear and
every
feel
little stone.
Everything. It's got
flick a stone up on the wheel and hit the floor pan and you'd be like ting.
It's got some sound deadening through it because we tried to lower the center of gravity and the weight and stuff, so it actually made sense to put some in because it's underweight now because it's so light because it only weighs in at 1170. So
really,
with
you in it,
that's with me in it.
Wow.
With
tank of gas.
1,500.
That's without fuel.
Wow.
That's cool. But we run a fuel cell when we're doing time attack stuff. So you're only talking less than that if you're doing time attack.
Yeah, you only run 2 laps worth of fuel.
Yeah, exactly. So you're talking like a couple of kilos.
And so you're going to pilot it at time attack?
Yeah, so we'll race it. It'll race under two drivers. So I'll race it, and then we'll have a professional driver also race it. Luckily, I've got a lot of mates that race professionally, so I'll probably have one of them race it. So Brody or Anton are really keen to race it, so probably one of those guys will wheel it around. And Brody's probably more reckless than Anton, so maybe him. I don't know. It is we're after like raw speed on one lap, so I don't know. I shouldn't say that on the podcast. Like, I don't know what's better. It's like, are you more reckless, therefore faster on one lap, or are you better on multiple laps? I don't know which one they'd prefer.
Yeah. Whoever qualifies quicker.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, true.
Yeah, you
got to take the car out of the equation. So I'd have to. I might actually get them to do an audition. So I'll take them down. I'll take them down to SMP, and they can all race around. Actually, so it'll be interesting. I'll tell you. Yeah, we'll see.
Yeah, no, that'll be a super quick car around one lap, especially at Eastern Creek.
Yeah, it will be really interesting. So obviously the current World Toe Attack winner is a 32 GDR and has won multiple years in a row now. So it'll be interesting to see, because it's pretty much the same sort of setup. Like, it runs virtually a similar engine, slightly different turbo, but basically the same engine, basically the same driveline, or the exact same driveline. Everything about the cars is pretty identical, but the aero will be massively different. Yep. So that will determine quite a lot. Hopefully I'm more Ferrari than Mercedes. In terms of our adaptation of the aero for the rules.
Yeah. No, very cool. It's going to be fast around turn one.
Oh yeah, I mean they're really into it through turn one at Time Attack as well, and so it'll be it'll be interesting to see the difference in the speeds as well between me and them, which will be horrendously. I don't know whether I'll have the same balls to keep it down almost through there, especially because it's so quick in a straight line with the amount of power that the 32 has. So a lot of the cars, they're obviously heavily reliant on their aero, and they have a lot less power, so they're a lot slower down that front straight. A
lot of them don't even lift. They get to the end of the straight,
that's right. Turn. Most of the cars do, but obviously I know Extreme, which is the other 32 GDR, it does lift.
Yeah, it does,
they have to. It's because they're going so fast, and so we'll be in a similar situation. It'll be like, how fast can you go? How much grip can you get?
Yeah.
But the scariest thing, I think, for a lot of people, and I shouldn't say this because Yokohama help us out, but like the scariest thing is the tires for a lot of them. It's just because, and you're doing such intense loads at such extreme speeds on those tires, which are, they're built for motorsport conditions, but
still a street car, a street tire.
It's still a street tire. It's still a semi-slick. And so they had I think they had a few issues last year with the tires, which a lot of people were really scared about because the cars are just getting faster and faster. And so it'll be interesting to see what happens this year down there, or this coming year. But it's an interesting tire. So that's what we run all the time on the car. But it's an expensive exercise because you're burning through those things pretty quick, especially when you're out putting down serious time. So and the softs don't last very long. So
have you ever had a crack at drifting?
No, I mean, I have drifted. I've been out to drift days and stuff. I've gone out to drift days and actually drifted, but never consistently. It was always just like a fun thing to go out and do. Like you go out to Power Cruise or something like that. You're like, oh yeah, I'll have a bit of fun, but never done it properly. It's something I'd probably like to do a bit more of. The car, the 32 could easily drift, well, obviously.
Yeah, all four tires.
We get a slightly different experience. But you can obviously change the torque split and stuff pretty easily. So
not a car you'd do that in there, I don't think.
No, I don't think I would. I'd probably much prefer to do it in a cheaper car. It's quite an expensive one to run into a wall. It does, obviously you could take the carbon panels off it and run the other panels, which we do in door-to-door racing normally, but even still it's an expensive car to be you don't want
to take it off the track accidentally and rip everything off it.
No.
So who's prepping that car for you?
So there's a few different people involved in it. Actually, there's a lot of different people involved in it. So there's different people for aero, there's different people. But the guys out at Norwell have been looking after the car primarily for me. So I know Paul and a few of the guys out there pretty well, and they've been really, really good about, I guess, looking after the car for me. And you kind of need someone at a race level of experience when you're, I guess, setting those cars up. And so it becomes a little less about, I know a lot about GDRs and a lot more about, I know a lot about motorsport.
Yep.
And so between them and then multiple other people that have been involved kind of off them, then they've been handling the car. So as you know, when you get to cars at that level, it's like you've got different people for the shocks. You've got different people. Everything's different. It's like this person's taking care of the suspension. This person's taking care of aero. This person takes care of engine. This person takes care of tuning. This person takes care of setup.
It's an expensive day to go have a play in it.
Yeah, it really is. And it's at the point where I'm kind of like, it's one of those things where you kind of almost take it too far sometimes.
Yep.
And now it's
I've done that.
one of those cars where it's like, it's so much effort to take that thing to the track that it's pretty much at the point where I'm like, okay, it's going to have to be just an arrive and drive scenario where you guys trailer it out, we take a crew, because there's just too many things that can go wrong with that car now, and you can't really fix it yourself. Like, you almost need someone who's out there from an engineering perspective to be able to diagnose and look at it, because I mean, I can pull a log, I can look at a log, I can diagnose a problem, but I sure as shit don't want to fix it on that car. So,
no, because a small mistake costs a lot of money.
Yeah, a horrendously large amount of money. And it's quite funny because the journey on that car got started because of a mistake that we all made one night when we were trying to figure out what was wrong with it. So.
On the laptop?
No, it was, so I bought that car literally by accident. My girlfriend was so unhappy. Like, we're broken up now, not because of the car, but she's like, what in the actual F is this car that you've bought? She hated it. Not a car girl. And so, but anyway, so I was driving back. We'd been out, I think, at paintball with one of my mates. And you guys might know him, Mark Truno.
Yep.
You know Truno?
Yeah, I do, yep.
And so Truno put up for sale all of these cars. And I was like, God, I want a 32 again. And so he put it up, and he put it up for a price that was like 50 grand. And I was like, holy fuck, he has undervalued this car so hard. And in hindsight, he's like, I undervalued that car so hard. And so I was like, oh wow, this thing's a really good buy. And they were worth like 100 at the time. Yeah. So I was like, I should get this thing. So I went and I bought it. And then at the time I was like, this is just going to be a fun street car. It'll be a bit of an all-rounder. I'll spend a bit of money on it, but nothing crazy. And I'll just take it out to the track sometimes, go for mountain runs. Anyway, I had it for a few weeks, and I was racing like one of my mates on the circuit. And in hindsight, we popped a shim in the head, but we didn't know what it was at the time. And so it was obviously the engine's making crazy noises. And I'm like, oh, is this coming from the bottom end? What is this? And we're trying to kind of diagnose it. And then I was like, let's just run a compression test on it, and that'll kind of tell us something. So, so we pull all the core packs off, pull the plugs out. We're testing cylinder by cylinder. And we're like, oh, it's weird. Anyway, so we screw the compression test into one of the cylinders, go turn over the engine, won't turn over. I'm like, that's weird. What's going on? Must be flat battery. So we thought it was flat battery, and long story short, it wasn't a flat battery. But we tried really hard to turn the car over for a while once we charged the battery.
Yeah, right.
And one of the guys had dropped one of the bolts from the coil pack down into the cylinder. And so it compression locked the engine. And at the beginning we thought, oh, it's okay. It's just done a bit of damage to like the piston, and, it hasn't really scored the bore or anything. Once we got the engine apart, then we found, no, it like turned a bearing, and it was,
Oh, wow.
So I was like, oh, yeah, we're doing the bottom end. And then it was like, oh, do we just, the engine builder's like, you don't want to put this old head like on this amazing new bottom end, do you? And I'm like, oh, I guess you're right. So then we got a brand new head, shimless, of course.
Yeah, shimless. Yeah,
Learned from that lesson. And then he's like, oh, well, you're not going to go strap the old turbos and stuff onto this thing. I'm like, holy shit, why is this thing a supercar? Yeah. I loved S14s. I mean, I loved all those cars. Yep. It was just like, I loved 180s. Back in the day, I was like obsessed with getting a strawberry faced 180 and putting a 26 in it. And ironically, one of my mates has one of those now. Also from Truno.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Man, he's had some cars, eh?
Yeah, that guy has had some cars. He's had some cool ones. Some really cool cars.
Sure.
He still does.
Yeah, his Instagram's fire, eh?
Yeah.
He's got heaps of cars. He's always getting pulled over by the cops. Is that him?
Yeah, he does get pulled over by the cops. Unsurprisingly.
But he has a dash cam.
Yeah. He's got dash cams front and back.
And he's always like legit. Like he's always
is.
cool with them, and like everything's sweet.
Yeah.
And often it's like they're just like, oh, we just wanted to have a look at the car. And
yeah, they're pretty good with him a lot of the time. I think you've got a clean looking car. Like that's kind of the difference to the old days. All the cars back in the day, they were like pigs.
Yeah.
And so the cops will pull you over and just look at it and go,
just like zip tie stitching on the bumper.
Like this thing is not safe.
Yeah.
Whereas like the 32, when I've just freshened the engine and did a whole heap of stuff to it, it was clean, and I got mod plates put on it and stuff. And so I get pulled over and I'd be like, it's all legal. And, I think that they kind of knew that there was a chance that some stuff wasn't. But, they look at it and they go, this looks like a decent, well put together car. It's not unsafe.
You spent the time and money to make it as neat and tidy as possible.
Yeah. And I think that's, a lot of the time the good cops, I think, will look at it and go, okay, is this unsafe? Are you an idiot?
Yeah.
You're not driving like an idiot, and you've got a good looking car. I think that's the right approach. That's the pragmatic approach. Take people off the road, take cars off the road that are actually problems. Don't do it for cars that are not an issue.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
sure.
So back to the McLaren. How did it feel to like, because that's your first supercar, right?
Yeah, it is. Yeah.
How did that feel to like sign the contract on the first one? And
it was kind of a surreal experience, I think, because it all happened so quickly for me that it wasn't kind of like, oh yeah, I'm waiting for it, and it's like, oh, here's the delivery day, and so but it felt amazing, and I think when I got it, I probably enjoy it more now and more excited about it sometimes now than I am when I first got it, to be honest. But it was a weird experience for me, I think, in the sense that it was just kind of all a little bit surreal, because I didn't think I was going to get. I was like kind of in my head, I was like, oh, I'm not getting it for a year, and so then when it kind of happened, it was a mix of like excitement, but also like, oh, is this real? well. And
have I done the right thing?
Yeah. I was pretty content with the decision, but yeah, it was super exciting. And then obviously getting it and stuff. And it is an amazing car. I've driven them a lot before. A few of my friends have got them too. So it is an amazing car. For me, it's the car, like that's the car that I really, really wanted. I'd wanted one for a long time. I'd almost convinced myself that I'd get an SF90 instead at one point because I was just like, oh, maybe it'll be easier for me to quickly get one of these. And there was a couple popping up. But yeah, no, I'm really, really happy with the decision. And it does feel more like a driver's car. And since the exhaust has gone on, it was way too quiet before. But now that the exhaust is on there, it feels a lot more like a proper like driver's supercar. It does throw a lot of flames. You just drive.
I saw the videos.
You be driving along at night.
Details
I was behind him just going. Yes, I want to see more.
Have you got any tips for aspiring owners or people who are trying to get into a financial position and work on their business and get to a position where they can buy a car like that? Or?
It doesn't come quickly or easily. I think a lot of people, unfortunately, these days kind of keep thinking, oh, I'm going to get this viral business and it's going to go gangbusters and then I'm going to do this. And I think try and do it for the right reasons and try and build it, over time. That's the smartest thing to do. And I think take advice from other people and, I guess it's super hard because there's nothing that's going to fit into a quick soundbite, I don't think. And I think the fact that it doesn't fit into a quick soundbite, that's kind of the point.
100%.
You can't do it quickly. You're not going to be overnight success. If you are, hat off to you.
Well done.
Congratulations, well done. But people should know 99% of the time it's going to take you a while. It's going to be a slow burn. It's going to be a grind, and you should lean into that. And if you can't lean into that, then
you should love the process.
You probably shouldn't be an entrepreneur in the first place.
Exactly.
Yeah. Good advice.
It's hard. I mean, it feels like, one of those things that you say as you're getting older, like, oh, the kids of today, but it really does feel that way.
Yeah.
And so I don't know. A lot of them do want it now and they want it super quick. And it's like, that's not quite how business or money works.
Yeah, exactly. And also the content that everyone's watching is getting shorter. They're saying like, Keegan started Artesian and within 4 years he owns a McLaren 720. It's like, what about the 10 years of skill building before that?
Correct.
You know what I mean?
And that is the exact point, right? I couldn't have, and even the startup that I had, like I didn't know so much. It's funny because I was looking at my computer the other day when I was like clearing a whole heap of stuff out of it, and I found some of like the decks and things that I had from back then, and they were professional because at the time I was a reasonably successful guy working in a massive international finance and law firm, but it was still real amateur hour. Like looking at it now, I'm like, that was pretty amateur. And like even thinking of my mindset back then, thinking you really thought that they were going to give you money. Wow, that's bad. And that's the thing. It's like, I think people just need to accept that they don't know everything. This business probably won't succeed, but you do it anyway because that's what you've got to do. And you keep doing it.
It's
time
skill
and
building
time again.
every time. Like even if something just falls on its face in the most unfashionable way, it's still skill building.
Yeah. And I think the skill building point to go back to like advice, I think it would be for me, people should actually think about working for other people. I think that we've glorified too much this idea of being the entrepreneur where it's like, don't ever work for anyone else. Never work for anyone else a day in your life. Okay, like yes, for some people that might be fantastic advice and that might be what they should do. They might be born, being an entrepreneur. They might have intuition. They might be street smart and smart. That's not likely the case for a lot of people though. And most people do need to build skills. And you can only build skills from people that can teach you skills, people that have actually done it before. And so I think too often we glorify this notion of like, don't ever work for anyone, don't go to university. It's a waste of your time. Well, probably not for a lot of people. Probably working for other people is going to help you.
I'm imagining your PA or the PA to like Gold Coast top real estate agents and jobs like that. They're the kind of jobs that are putting people in good positions to learn skills.
100%.
To leverage them for themselves later.
It's one of the, that's the thing. And so people go, oh yeah, like you say, being an EA or a PA or going and working underneath someone, like that's the best thing you can do. You're literally going to learn from that person what all of those years, they're going to be teaching you the stuff that's like, here's why I don't do that, or this is why I want it done this way. And when you make a mistake, they tell you why they want it done a different way, and you learn from that process.
10 years of advice condensed.
Yeah, you can. It might be a few years that you work underneath someone, and it's no surprise that when you look around and people go and form startups and they go and do these other things, a lot of the time they come from those incubated environments where it's like, oh, I used to work here and now I do this. The problem is that no one makes movies about the guy who worked for Mark Zuckerberg or Sergey Brin for 8 years, then went and founded an AI startup, or then went and founded this. They don't make movies about that because it's not cool, because people don't want to hear that story. What the story they want to hear is This guy went to uni for 1 year, was too good for it, dropped out and found $1 billion company, and overnight he was a success.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool story. Don't get me wrong. But unfortunately, it's not reality most of the time.
There's not many of them.
And people need to
one in
accept
a billion, yeah.
Pretty close.
Yeah. Cool.
Sweet.
All right. Well,
yeah, thanks very much for your time.
No worries. Thanks for having me, guys.
cheers.
It's good.
Good chat.
Cheers, guys.
Cool.
Cheers.
Thank
Cheers.
you.